All right.
Hello.
Welcome back.
What's up?
Ready to get it off and pop in?
No.
All right. Well, sounds like a him problem. Asha, what you got?
We've got riddles.
Oh, wait. Are we competing?
Whoever answers first, just answer them. I'm not going to press the buzzer right now.
What has to be broken before you can use it?
An egg.
Correct.
I was going to say glow stick.
That works too.
I'm tall when I'm young, and I'm short when I'm old. What am
Pencil.
I? Nope.
Say it again.
I'm tall when I'm young, and I'm short when I'm old. What am I?
Match.
You're really close.
Is it a cigarette?
No.
Oh. That was my initial. But a match?
A fire?
No.
Which was close? The match or the pencil?
The match.
The match. Sparklers.
No. But you're-
Candles.
Yeah, candles. What is full of holes but still holds water?
Sponge.
What question can you never answer yes to?
Are you dead?
No, but you're really close. Well, yeah, you're close.
When did you die? Oh, can you never answer no to?
But can never say no or never say yes.
Oh, my bad.
You can never answer yes to.
Never answer yes. Did you die was close. Are you dead was close.
Is this your funeral? I feel like that's close to what you've been asking.
Sorry, what was it?
Is this your funeral?
No.
It's very close to what she's been asking.
It has nothing to do with dying.
Oh. So how was I close?
I know. I'm sorry. It's not.
I know.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, right?
Less permanent.
Less permanent? Are you awake?
Correct.
I can answer yes to that. Are you asleep?
Oh, yes. Are you asleep?
Are you
That is
asleep?
the correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Less permanent.
A man who was outside in the rain without an umbrella or a hat didn't get a single hair on his head wet.
Bald.
Correct.
Did we have that one before? Okay.
I shave every day, but my beard stays the same. What am I?
You shave every day, but your beard stays the same.
Yeah.
A person that shaves their legs every day.
I was going
No.
to say their head.
A person that shaves their head every day, but not their beard.
A woman. I mean, some women have facial hair. Some women have facial hair. But my beard stays the same. Do you not have a beard? Are you clean shaven?
Mm-mm.
Do you wear a fake beard?
No. Let me know when you give up.
I shave every day, but my beard stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
What are you shaving? Ice?
Mm-mm.
Are you shaving like an animal?
No.
Like a farmer, like shaving like a sheep for wool?
That's
Like
shearing. Can we have a hint?
How do you give a hint for that?
Yeah,
No,
I
they're
don't
gonna get- They're gonna get
No,
it.
I can't give a hint.
Do
Sorry.
you want to call it?
yeah, let's call
All
it.
right.
A barber.
Oh, he's shaving other people.
What can't talk but will replay when spoken to?
Echo.
The more of this there is, the less you see.
Darkness.
What has many keys but can't open a single lock?
Piano. What?
Is she talking to me or you?
I don't know.
I'm light as a feather, yet the strongest person can't hold me for 5 minutes. What am I?
Breath.
Huh?
Your breath.
Yeah. What invention lets you look right through a wall?
A window.
What can't be put in a saucepan?
What?
What can't be put in a saucepan?
In a saucepan? A pot?
Mm-mm.
Sauce.
No.
What cannot be put in a saucepan? I feel like a lot of things can't be put in a saucepan. Is it something that would belong in a kitchen?
Mm-hmm.
That didn't narrow it down.
It really
That
didn't.
narrow it down. Is it another cooking utensil? Or is it something you eat?
Neither.
Is it a concept?
No.
Those questions did nothing for me.
Is it another cooking utensil? Yeah, I guess it could be.
Could be what? A concept?
No, another cooking utensil.
The lid.
Yeah.
Good one.
What goes up and down but doesn't move?
Stairs.
What has lots of eyes but can't see?
I had this one.
Eyes but can't
I don't remember the answer.
Oh, I remember. Can I have a hint? Eyes but can't see. What does it start with?
What does it start with?
A hurricane? No.
No.
Tornado? No.
No.
A storm.
Mm.
Lots of eyes. Mississippi River.
Mm.
Are we talking about literal eyes or like letter eyes? Mirror.
No.
No, that's only one eye.
Can I be honest? I don't even get this one.
Which one? Oh, yeah.
Say it in the mic.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can I have a hint?
It's edible.
Edible. Are we talking about like eyes or like letter eyes?
Not the letter eyes.
Not the letter. Okay. And it's edible. It has many eyes, but it cannot see.
What's edible that has eyes?
But can't see.
Do you give up? I don't think you guys are gonna get it.
Can I get what kind of what cat like breakfast, lunch, dinner, sweet,
can-
savory?
Yeah, it can be all.
It's a versatile food.
Oh my goodness, eggs.
No.
No.
Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Potatoes.
Yes.
Yes, that's a good one.
Thank you for playing.
Oh,
All right. All right. So we're continuing to talk about Peter walking on water, right? How do you handle times of uncertainty in your life?
Not very well.
I was about to say like yeah, no one can look at you.
Times of uncertainty. I think. Well, because I've talked about this before. I'll continue to talk about it. My biggest weak point is that I don't like not knowing. Right.
Mhm.
My biggest struggle is uncertainty. So if I'm in a situation of uncertainty, I'm gonna look for certainty.
Mhm.
Right. Even if it's not relevant to the current situation, I'm gonna look for something that I know. Right. If I'll walk away and I'll do something else and then I'll come back to it when I'm like at a better headspace, but I need solid ground.
Okay. So, with that then, where do you look for that solid ground?
It it depends on the situation, depending on what it is that I'm uncertain about.
Mhm.
More often than not, I've tried to teach myself to turn to God more.
Okay.
Because more often than not, like especially with like life decisions, that's where I should be turning.
Mhm.
Whether that's in asking like someone older for guidance, whether that's turning directly to the word or directly to prayer. Like there's many different avenues with which you can do it, but ultimately giving it up to God, which is again one of the things I've had to work on because, like we spoke about in the last, like we mentioned in the last episode, if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll never know if God's answering you.
Mhm. So, I think a big part of uncertainty in life is having an anchor point, right? And I think when we look at the story of Peter, I'm not gonna reread Matthew 14. Um, we read it last episode, but
Okay.
for Peter to stand on water, he needed something to anchor his faith in, right? A word from God can calm a storm, it can raise the dead, it can bring an entire universe into being. Yet, so often we don't create space in our lives to receive a word from God. Peter did not just stand on water, he stood on a word.
I thought you were gonna say he stood on business.
I
That would have been a better, not a better, but that would have been a
yeah.
good use of the phrase.
But John 16:33 says, Jesus says, I have told you all this that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Right? This is Jesus talking to the disciples, right? Jesus is making a point here. Okay, there's going to be trials, sorrows, there'll be times of uncertainty. Yet, you need to be able to take heart in me, in him, right? Um is that easy to do in times of uncertainty?
Um, if you don't have the foundation, I guess, of doing it, I can see where it has been difficult or it can be difficult.
Okay. Um yeah, no, I agree with that. I think going back to kind of what we started talking about last episode, if you don't have a relationship with God,
Hmm.
right? And you haven't spent that time kind of waiting on God to get to know him, yeah, when you are in times of uncertainty, it may be difficult to stand on his word because you don't know what his word says,
Hmm.
right? Um, so there are two aspects to God's word, right? there's something called logos, right? Which is the written word of God to us as we find it in the Bible, right? And then there's like, I mean, you've been to the conferences. There's a company called Logos that their whole software is about understanding God's written word, the Bible. But then there's another thing called Rima, God's current immediate word to you within the circumstances you find yourself. Right? An example of that being the retreat, right? A lot of people received a immediate word from God to speaking into their current circumstances, right?
Mhm.
Why is God's logos word essential to living a life of water walking faith, or just a life of faith in general?
So why is the Bible
Mhm.
helpful in building your faith?
Yep. Why is it essential?
Essential, sorry. I think because if you haven't had experiences or instances in your life of where you needed to stand on your own faith, it provides a lot of examples of people that did. I think also, like you said, it's God's written word, right? So if you want to learn about God and learn about who he is and like what he's about, you should read his word, right? If you're looking for a sign from God, a message from God, or like just to have that communication with him, the first place to start, I would say, or one of the first places to start would be the word. Because it's kind of like that's like your FBI dig into who God is.
Mm-hmm. So now, why is God's Rima word essential to living a life of faith?
I think it confirms what you've read in the word.
Okay.
Right? Or a lot of times, like I know for me, if I'm seeking clarification on something, right, and I like we mentioned before, right, in the last episode, God's shown you a sign, but you're like, no, that's not
Mhm.
it. Sometimes that Rima, what is the phrase Rima?
Just Rima is God's current word to you.
Right. So a lot of times that will be like another confirmation of what it is that you might be like seeking God out for.
Yeah, I think I was like trying to figure out like what would that be like for like a regular like relationship? What would this look like? And to me, I feel like that logos part is the information about someone you have a relationship with that's open to everyone.
Mhm.
Right? So you have and this, whether it's friendship or like dating, like romantic relationship, whatever it is, right? Everyone can know that that person is funny.
Mhm.
Right? But you may be like, if you're really close to them, that the Rima part would being, you know what the jokes are though.
Mhm.
Right? Like everyone else went, oh yeah, like Bob is really funny. Okay, but because you're close to Bob tells you the actual jokes, right? Like there's like, to me, Rima is the, okay, you have a relationship with God where he is now, you've hit like that a certain level of intimacy with God, right? So I think, well, which of the two do you tend to hear more clearly?
Interesting. Like in my current situations versus like looking into the word. Is that what you're asking? Because
Between
the Rima is like,
well, right, Rima would be what he's saying to a word to you within the circumstance you find yourself. Logos would just be what God is saying in the Bible that's just there. Which do you tend to hear more clearly?
I think I hear Rima more clearly, but then I go back to the word to confirm certain things.
Okay, yeah, I actually felt the same way, but I also feel like for me,
But it hasn't always been that way.
yes, that's what I was saying. I
Yeah.
feel like there was a point in which that kind of like shifted to
Mhm.
hearing God became a lot clearer, right? Um, so actually, let's talk about that for a second. What was like, when did you realize, okay, I am hearing God much more clearly than, I don't know how, what's the right way to say it, than just reading the Bible?
So with me, like for specific instances, like let's see, like let's talk about like future planning, right? Career planning,
Mhm.
school, whatever. I had been praying for certain things, and like for a moment it was hard for me to discern whether this was my thought process or if this was God's like telling me like this is what you should do
Okay.
in certain ways. And so I was praying about it, and then I had certain conversations with some of my cousins, them not having known what I've been praying about.
Mm-hmm.
And in two separate conversations, in two like very different situations, the both of them said kind of the same thing back to me.
Mm.
So that's when I was like, okay, this isn't just me,
Right.
right? So like from that on, I kind of worked harder on discerning when it is God speaking in my life versus like me thinking like this is what I should do and
Mm.
and, like taking it into my own hands.
Yeah, I think for me, it was like, I don't know when, but I think sometime after COVID, there was definitely a moment where there were certain things that, to exactly to what you're saying, certain things that I have been talking to God about, but I haven't shared with anyone,
Mhm.
where either other people, somehow other people just knew exactly what I was talking about.
Mhm.
And it's almost like, you know, like, what was it? Like when you're learning to write like essays for like English class or whatever, and they're like, take the question and like turn it into like
A statement.
your statement
Yeah.
or whatever. I feel like that's what God did with like my prayers.
Mm.
Like whatever I was praying for, that person would just say it back the question to me as like a statement.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, that has to be God, because He's the only other person that knows what I
Yeah,
just said,
exactly.
right? And then that just, and especially the first time it happens, then you start noticing. For me, I started noticing it happening a lot more, and it became easier to notice,
Mhm.
right? To the point where, for me, one of the things that started to happen for me was, and this happens to me at the retreat, where um, when that last night, when everyone was kind of going up there and getting prayed for, right? I was in the back and I'm like writing down stuff, because I'm like, okay, I know God's voice now, and God is saying this, this, and this to me,
Mm.
right? And I was like, okay, because I'm gonna forget it. So I started just like trying to write it down as quickly as I could. But yeah, I think that's one of the things of, okay, how much time are you investing into your relationship with God? Because if you're not investing into your relationship with God, then you don't, it just becomes almost impossible to hear Him, right? Even if you're reading the Bible, because you can read the Bible and get nothing from it.
Yep.
Right? Because I know
Mhm.
when I was younger, that used to happen, because I was just reading it for the sake of reading it, right? Just to tell people, oh yeah, no, I read my Bible, right? So
There's a difference between it being part of your routine and like between you taking like intentional time out to read and study the word.
mm-hmm. So yeah, so I think that was a big kind of thing for me, of like, okay, no, God is definitely speaking to me. Um, but with that, then what can stop us from hearing God's voice?
Doubt.
What was that?
Doubt.
Okay.
Right. So like I said before, like a lot of times it took me a while to determine whether this is me like thinking I should do this, this, and this, and taking control of the situation versus this is God's voice telling me to do this.
Okay. So using that as the example, right?
Mhm.
When that initial moment that God speaks and you're not sure if it's Him, right?
Mhm.
Were you in a position of, I'm listening for God to give me an answer, or was it more like, God, I'm supposed to pray, so I'm going to pray about this kind of thing? Like, were you expecting to hear God
I think
in that sense?
it was one of those things where I was hoping to hear from God,
Okay.
but like I didn't know when or how it
Okay.
would happen. So it's not like I was in my time of prayer, like
Mhm.
actively waiting for a word, but it was like I've been talking to God about this for like a period of time, and I know that I'm good in these things or whatever, or I'm interested in these things. God, like, tell me where I should go, like what I should be putting my effort into, like whatever. And so at first it was hard for me to determine if this was me logically thinking like, okay, I'm good at this thing, I should just further that, versus God saying, I've given you this skill set and I want you to further it in this way.
So the reason I asked that is because when like using the thing from last episode with that girl and stuff, right? As much as I was asking God for like a sign or whatever, I don't think I really wanted an answer either. So when he did give very clear signs, it was very easy to be like, that's not God, because I'm not actually in a position where I'm trying to listen to God.
Did you not want an answer because you knew what it would be?
Eventually it turned into that, because then I realized, okay, God is talking, and I was like, okay, God, no, like, give me like a sign. Like,
Yeah.
the initial thing was my dad saying like, why are you dating this girl? And when that happened, I was like, no, there's no way that's God. Like, there's no way he would be that, like, and I think part of it was because I didn't know what to listen for either. I was like, there's no way God would be like that blatant.
And that's what I'm saying.
with
Like
his
doubt
answer.
gets in the way
Right.
a lot of times,
Well,
where it's like we don't know.
Right. Yeah. But for me, the doubt was more so of, it wasn't a doubt of God's voice. It was a doubt that God would actually answer. That's really what I meant. It's like, yeah, I'm praying about this, but is God really going to answer me about a girl that I had been dating for like 2 weeks or something at that point? Like, why would God waste this? Like, it was more of a thing like that. And then it quickly became, okay, God, how do we change the answer here? All right. And that didn't work either. Yeah, I agree with doubt. I think another part of it is just being in a position to listen. Going back to what we talked about last episode, right? The idea of waiting on God, right?
Yep.
I think this is why a lot of people get stuck in that waiting, because I don't know when this happened, but I think there is this idea, and to me, I think it's explained poorly, which is, when you pray, you have to kind of like sit there and wait for God to respond. Right? I don't know, like, I feel like that's what's been taught, like Sunday school kind of thing, even youth group to an extent.
I feel like a lot of times it's kind of portrayed as like a regular two-way conversation.
Yes.
Where it's like, I'm speaking, now it's your turn to speak, and then like, back and forth.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily how God works all the time.
Right. And I think in doing that, again, going back, right, people get stuck in waiting because they're waiting for a response, right? That the response might be coming, it's just not coming that way.
That, and I feel like there's also this like expectation that like when God speaks to you, it will always be very clear and very like,
Yeah.
But which, yes, a lot of times it is, but that's once you've learned to discern that this is God speaking to you, right? So like the first few times where I have doubted it is because I did not realize that that was God speaking to me, right? And so in like they say, hindsight is 20/20, right?
Yeah.
So after I knew that I was praying for the certain thing and I thought I heard it, but I wasn't sure, and then I had conversations where it came up again, right? Unprompted, like no one knew. Then I'm like, okay, wait. This is a little too coincidental, right? And so you kind of put things together and it's like, okay, maybe that was not even maybe, like that was God's confirmation. That was God speaking to me. And now I have confirmation through these like further conversations.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think one of the things that ends up happening, right? And I've been like trying to figure out another example of this because I'm not sure how used to the radio people are nowadays,
My goodness, yeah.
right? So I've been trying to think of like another example. Because then my other examples gonna be like TV channels on like or people
They
used to
don't do that
TV channels
anymore.
either. So because realistically, I think God is like I don't have a scripture for this, but I will put it this way. For me, I believe God is always speaking. Right? Whether it's logos or rima, I think God is always speaking. Right? I feel that way because God is always pursuing a relationship with us, so he's always communicating to us, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Right? The reason I say that is more often than not, the issue with hearing from God is not that God is silent, but rather we don't know what to listen for.
Mhm.
Right? So with that, I think a lot of times listening or rather hearing from God is a matter of us being on the same frequency that God is on, right? And if you've ever played with a radio in that sense, you know that as you start to get closer to the exact frequency, you start to hear the radio station, but it's kind of like garbled. There's noise. You might be hearing the
Like the
previous
static.
radio station
Yeah.
and stuff like that, right? But you're starting to hear it, right? And then as you get to that exact one, all of a sudden it's typically crystal clear, right?
I think even like walkie-talkies,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to make sure you're on the right channel.
Mm-hmm.
Different channels can pick up different things.
Yeah.
And so again, like you were saying, if you don't know what you're listening for, you might be on the wrong channel listening to the wrong things.
Yeah. See, even with them, like how many
Yeah, I don't
people
know.
use walkie-talkies nowadays?
I don't know.
But again, right? Like you have to be on that right frequency with God,
Mhm.
right? But then, and this applies to the walkie-talkies and the radio. If you're not within the range that God is broadcasting,
Mhm.
you can have the right radio station, you'll still never hear him,
Mhm.
right? Like, I got into the car the other day. I had to drive my parents' car back from the retreat, and they still had like Caleb on, so there was just nothing. I got in the car and there's just nothing. I'm like at one point I was really like, what did you guys listen to for like the second half of this drive? Because nothing was playing.
Maybe they spoke to each other.
Maybe. I'm just saying, like, the thing, but it's not like
Good
the
old
volume.
communication.
It's like, it's not like the volume was off. So I was like, does that mean you just hearing
was it
static?
just static?
I'm like, I'm trying to figure out. I'm like, because in the parking lot, it's like a dead zone. So I don't think
Yeah.
you would have heard anything on it. I'm just like, what was going on? I was like, all right. But that becomes the other thing of when we talk about communicating with God, we have to be close enough to him to hear him, right? But then we also have to be on the right like frequency. We have to be connected to him, right? And I think one of the reasons why people often don't hear from God is because they have one and not the other. They're close to God, but they're not on the right frequency, right? Or they're on the right frequency, they're just not close to God,
Mm.
right? And I think,
Can you be close to God and not on the right frequency?
yeah, you could have gone to that retreat, been in the service that Tuesday night, right? God was there. You were close to God in that moment,
Okay.
but you didn't hear nothing from him,
Okay.
right? And same thing, right? There's an altar call. You can go up. Doesn't mean, right? Then at the same time, you can know the frequency of God in that sense, but then you don't come to church.
Yeah, it's
Right?
like knowing what to do
You
but
don't
not doing it.
right.
Yeah.
You're never close to him, right? So I think I know in my own experience, I've been in both positions. I remember there was at one point I had asked a pastor like, why don't I hear from God? Right? Like that was a legitimate question. I was like, hey, I'm here. I know he's here. I'm just not hearing from him. Right? And then like eventually it was like, oh, I'm not on the same frequency as that God is operating on right now. Right? So I'm not gonna hear from him because I'm out here doing my own thing. So I think that was a big part of it. Right? Now, one of the reasons that we're focused on hearing from God, right, is, and I'll use back your stuff as an example, right? As you were talking to people, right, about like, your, let's call your dilemma, I know you said there were two people that you were like, okay, this is God talking, right? Like confirmation, right? Were there other people who gave you maybe good advice, but it wasn't the advice you needed from God?
Yes. So, like the instance that I'm talking about that we're referencing is I was like future planning, right?
Mhm.
Trying to figure out what to do with my life, whatever. And there were other people that were encouraging me to go on different paths that I may have expressed to them like years before, but have no longer found interest in. And so they were guiding me based off of that. Um, but it wasn't what I was asking God for. It was good advice. It was sound advice for sure, but it just wasn't applicable to my situation.
Yeah. So I think there's something that we have to understand, and this is why hearing from God is so important, right? When it comes to making decisions in life, there's good options and then there's the God option,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that a lot of times we think that because an option is good, it's from God, right? And that may not be the case,
Yep.
right? Because like as you said, right? And I'll this is what I'm taking away from what you've been saying, right? God had a very clear choice he wanted you to make about future stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? He confirmed it with two people.
Mm-hmm.
There were other people who care for you, want to see good things happen for your future, right? And probably gave you really good advice about things that probably would have worked out, right? But it would not have been what God wanted for
Yeah.
you, right? And I think that's one of the things, again, where it's like, hey, are we hearing from God when we have to make decisions? When just in life in general, are we hearing from God? Because there's a lot of times we can make good choices, but it doesn't mean that those choices are the choices that God wants us to make.
Yep. Like I definitely it is attainable what they were like advising me on,
Mm.
but it wasn't. It's like one of those things where like yeah you can do it, but like you said, it's not where God has called me. It's not where God wants me to be. And so then if I were to do that, I'm sure I would be okay at it, but would I have succeeded at the level that God wanted me to? Right?
Okay, John chapter 6, verse 35. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Right? Talking again about choices, right? When Jesus talks about him being the bread of life, and even when he talks about him having living water, right, with the woman at the well, right? We see Jesus kind of talking to people, right, about something that essentially is this very basic human need, right? And he's talking about how he can meet it, right? Right? We know water is a basic human need. We know food is a basic human need. Yet, Jesus does not call himself the fish of life, right? Or I don't know what like food they, like the steak or any like he doesn't call himself some like lavish food, right? He picks something that is relatively simple, right? I'm sure someone will be like, oh, there's this fancy bread or whatever. I'm not trying to get into that, right?
I mean, simple but necessity.
Right. Why is it important for us to keep that in mind when we're talking about making decisions, especially the difference between a good decision and a God decision, when the two may not be the same?
I think because a lot of times people want to look for the lavish, right? They want to look for the extravagant and stuff, but not everyone is called to that, right? There needs to be someone in the everyday, right? In the regular, in the mundane, that can, like, just because you're not living lavishly and extravagantly does not mean that God is not working in you or through you, right? Does not mean that you're not close to Him and right, like you don't have a relationship with Him. It also doesn't mean that you're not successful, because you don't have to be like super lavish and extravagant, right?
Mm-hmm. I also think a big part of that is realistically
Mm.
those types of lavish foods you can't eat every day.
Yep.
Right? And I'm sure some I mean like diet wise maybe you shouldn't eat bread every day, but that's a, like, right? But I think the point God or Jesus is trying to make with living water and the bread of life is he is something that you should be feeding your soul daily, right? And it's something that your soul can eat every single day, right? Um so when we talk about hearing from God, right, and making decisions, right, I think it's important that we remember, okay, we should be consuming Jesus on a daily basis,
Mhm.
right? And if we're not doing that, then we still don't understand who he is then, right? Because for him to say he's the living water and the bread of life, to understand what that means is to understand you need to be drinking from that living water and eating from that bread of life. And if you're not, then you are missing a part of who Jesus is in your relationship. So I think that's something that we do need to kind of take like a self inventory of. Am I actually focused on being fed from Jesus every day?
Mm.
Right? Because I do think sometimes we use substitutes for it, right? Like, and again, I'm gonna say this as carefully as I can. I like there is a place for like music in your relationship with God, right? Um, Books that aren't the Bible, um, Chosen, like show, like I mean, it has become such a massively popular show, right? And yet, if that is where you're getting all of your spiritual nourishment, right? There's an issue there, right? Same thing. If you're only getting your nourishment when you come to church, right? Even if you come to church multiple times a week, it's still a problem, right? So are you spending that time where you are receiving from Jesus daily, right? I think that's also an important thing when we talk about hearing from God, right? The last, I don't know, big question I have written down is how do we make room in our lives to hear from God?
Well, first of all, do you want to hear from God?
Mm-hmm.
Um, then I think just like with any relationship, if you want to hear from the person, you have to make time to speak to the person.
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to make time to understand the person, because you can respond to me, but if I'm not understanding your response and the way that you speak, that's not going to mean anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it you can definitely start small and work your way up.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean, um, like start with like reading a couple verses a day, right? Or a couple chapters a day. Read the Bible. If you want to learn about God,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's basically one of the best places to do it, right? And then talk to God. Ask him to explain what it is that you're reading, right? Little things like that. Ask him for clarity. Um we've said before, you can read the same Bible story like at three different points of your life and get a different message every time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Depending on your knowledge and the depth that you're looking at the passage. So the same way, like, um, ask God to reveal things to you. Not even that, just like just talk to Him.
Mm-hmm.
Just like,
Yeah.
hey God, how you doing today? This is what happened to me, right? Not You don't have to ask God for things every time you're praying, because if you were to have a friendship where it only consisted of you asking for things, it's not a very good friendship,
Yep.
right? Because one, I don't know anything about the other person. I just know that they can do things for me. So the moment that they stop doing things for me in the way that I'm expecting to see it,
Mm-hmm.
that friendship is gone,
Yep.
right? So that's rocky to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you have to build a foundation on learning about who God is and what that means to you and for you. And then you can go into discerning whether like what God's voice sounds like.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I always thought was interesting about the story with Peter walking on water is he says, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to walk on water, or join you in the water, whatever." Jesus says, "Come." The next portion of the next verse isn't Peter then asks Jesus, "Okay, what am I supposed to do? Should I like take off my sandals? Should I like gird my loins? What do I need to do here?
What?
I don't know. He doesn't want to get wet. You don't want to have that skirt thing getting wet. Come on." Um, I feel like technically he probably would have as a fisherman. He probably would have done that too, though. But he Peter was never looking for a strategy. He was just looking for who was the person saying it, right? Um, I think a lot of times our or I think there's been times in my life when my approach to God has been, okay, God, what is the formula that you have for this? So the next time I'm in this situation, I can just go, okay, if when this happens, I do this, and then God will do this, and then I'll respond this way, and then I'm out of the situation. And that's the formula for any time I have to make it. Like, that's not what our relationship with God is meant to be.
Yep.
It's meant to be, okay, who is the one talking to you right now? Is it God or is it not? Right? And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Again, the your a story as example, right? Out of how much ever people you spoke to, two of them were confirming what God was saying. The rest, though well intentioned, were not.
Mm.
Right? Who are you listening to? Because again, if you're just listening for, especially if it's future stuff, like, and let's just say it's a job, right? There's probably a people you know who can give you good strategies on how to get a good job that pays well,
Mhm.
right? Does that mean it's what God is saying? That's a different story, right? So I think that's super important for us to realize, right? Peter was looking to who is saying it, not, it's more of who was saying it and less of what was actually being said.
Hmm.
I feel like you were going to say something.
No.
So, and along that same line, right? Um, Someone that I like follow on Instagram who is definitely not a Christian, right? Like when they post how they feel about the world, it's not how Jesus feels about the world, right? All of a sudden, as I'm just like tapping through like stories, I see like social media famous pastors, right, popping up in my stories, and it's like, oh, like they're like dating advice or whatever, and I'm like, oh, who posted this? Because in my head I'm like, there's like 2 or 3 like guys I know that would post this, right? They're always posting like Christian dating advice or whatever. So like I had to like tap back because I was like going through it so fast. Whereas it's this same girl who I'm like, no, she didn't. Like I'm like, it'd be great if she became Christian, like, woohoo. But I'm like, she's not Christian. And then I realized she's just looking for dating advice, right? The pages that posted that, it wasn't from like the actual like pastor's page or the church. It was one of those like generic like motivational,
Repost, okay.
daily motivational things, right? And they've edited the video just enough so if you don't know who it is, and it's generic enough with the way that the God is used that it could be just like a universal thing, not like Christianity, right? And I realized, oh, that's why she's reposting all this stuff. She doesn't realize who it is. So I'm pretty sure if she knew it was Christian, she'd be very like not posting it. But I say that again, like when you are looking to make a choice, right? You can approach it in, okay, what's being said and what's the actual source of what's being said, right? For her, it was just, oh, this sounds good, I'm going to repost it, right? As compared to, okay, no, what is God saying in this situation, right? What is that logos? What is that rema? Like what is God saying right now? And I think that as believers, when we talk about hearing from God, we have to get to a point where we're able to go and say, hey, you know what? What my friends or family, whatever, might say, it sounds really good, but I need to know what God is saying and then take action.
Mhm.
That's the end of my notes.
I figured.
Yeah.
I could tell it was coming. Nice.
Thank you.
I feel like we've had a lot of discussions in these past 2 episodes.
We did.
Nice.
And we're going to circle back to her whole don't perceive me thing. I did not forget about that. We are not going to forget.
I mean, you don't really have a good track record, so catch you next time.
It's very true.